Hello and welcome to this webinar, a conversation on customer-centric DataOps at Bremer Bank. We are recording this session and an on-demand version will be available on Zaloni.com in the resources section. If you'd like to share the live presentation, you can find the sharing button on the right of your screen. Please submit any questions you have throughout the presentation in the Ask a Question tab below the slides. I will now hand it over to Susan Cook, CEO at Zaloni, to begin.
Happy Wednesday, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We are super excited to be talking to you virtually. This presentation had actually been intended to be delivered live at the Gartner Data and Analytics Conference in Dallas in March. But the pandemic has changed a lot of everyone's plans right now. So we are delighted to speak to you virtually and hope and pray that soon this crisis will be over and we'll get to visit with each of you in person. So to that end, let's just give you a quick update on Zaloni. Again, my name is Susan Cook, and I joined Zaloni as CEO about 6 months ago. And we've got some exciting things that have been going on at Zaloni. So we might look a little bit different than you've heard in the past years, but we're really excited. We've got a new logo, a new website, and even a new brand for the Zaloni data platform. We have renamed it recently to Arena. Arena is a place where people and ideas and things come together in one centralized location, and then magic happens, like a sporting event or a concert. So that is the genesis behind, you might hear Leilani and I slip every once in a while and call it the Zaloni platform, but the new name for our product platform, it's the same great comprehensive platform that you've known for a couple of years now, but we've renamed it to Arena. So exciting things going on. So Zaloni is all about helping large enterprises on-prem, in the cloud, across multiple clouds, solve this very vexing challenge of data sprawling throughout the enterprise. We want to do that in a secure, governed, controlled fashion and give you transparency and visibility into the entire life cycle of your data, from beginning to end, soup to nuts. When we talk about that beginning to end, the end is not just where the IT responsibility ends or the data ops responsibility ends. We want to give you that transparency, visibility, and control all the way to when an end user consumes that data or does something with it. So we're having some really great success. We've partnered with AWS and Azure. We're in both of their marketplaces now, and hopefully by the end of the year, we'll also be with Google Cloud. We're getting recognized by some great organizations, the CIO 100, Data Solution of the Year for Finance. Just recently, Dresner Advisory recognized us as the #2 data pipeline solution for analytics. So you can see on the slide some of our recent awards. And in terms of customers, Bremer Bank, who you're going to be hearing from today. I know a lot of people on this call are from the financial services industry, so TIA Nuveen, RGA Insurance, PwC, Toronto Stock Exchange, Bank of England, Bank of America, a number of different types of customers. So that's a little bit about Zaloni, but you're not attending today to hear from me. Let's get to the star of this show, my very good friend and our very good customer, Leilani Moll, VP of Data and Analytics Services for Bremer Bank. So welcome, Leilani. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Susan. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. All right, well, let's dive right in. So Bremer has a Customer 360 initiative, which I think most banks do right now. So talk a little bit about what were the challenges that you faced when embarking on this journey as you were starting to contemplate this notion of customer golden records?
Great. So the starting point, of course, for us was not golden customer or customer 360. It is because, like most of our peers, we're down a digital transformation path. But as it turns out, digital transformation requires really accurate, governed, and timely customer records. So instead of starting with a golden customer 360, we really realized that we have to start with the customer first, and that's the golden customer record. Because you can imagine if you have duplicate customer records across your systems, then of course your 360 will be distorted. It will not give you the view that you were hoping for. So we actually started our Customer 360 initiative by building the customer first, and that's partly why we call it Customer-Centric. In a perfect world, you might have like a single source to onboard customers, and that will be your single source of truth. But reality is there is no single source of truth for most banks in our position because there's multiple places where a customer can be onboarded. What we're creating inside our customer analytics platform is what we call the single version of the truth because there is no source of truth, right? So therefore, our effort to build the golden customer record, meaning that unique list of customers across all of Bremer, was our starting point. And it's worth spending enough time in that, and I'll explain a little bit more. So to give you a 50,000-foot view of our approach, just so we could kind of level set, as we started with a clean slate. I know not everybody will have the luxury to start at a clean slate, but for us, turning our business intelligence environment into a customer analytics platform was just not going to work for us. And one of the simple reasons is we actually need both. So we couldn't wipe out and derail our business intelligence. Then we also know that there's a lot, everybody hears about data lakes turning into data swamps. So we were adamant that our data lake's not going to become a data swamp. We know that data swamps is a huge security risk. We had to find a way to leverage a data lake technology, but not make it turn into a data swamp. And for that reason, we were adamant that every piece of data that we ingest into the data lake will be known and classified before we start. Another approach was that we wanted to address the people, process, and technology question simultaneously because they're interlinked. The people that you're going to use to build this Customer 360 in your analytics platform may not be the exact same resources that build your data business intelligence environment. In our case, I highly recommend having a really good data platform architect because that's key on the people side. On the process side, all I want to say there, go with DataOps. It will solve a lot of nuances because DataOps supports in a bimodal model both mode 1 and mode 2 type work. From a technology, this is not a technology presentation. I just wanted to say that picking the technology platform that's easy to use combined with the right partner is what's going to help with your success. You cannot let the technology overwhelm the complexity of technology, overwhelm the resources. So we needed to pick one that you do not have a heavy, steep learning curve on the beginning. Another thing that was unique for us, though, is that we really needed to do our data homework. It's important at the beginning, before you even start to build or select a platform, is to really know where customers are onboarded in your organization. You may find a few surprises there. Most of these third-party apps where customers are onboarded, right, are spun up sometimes without you knowing. So it's beneficial to know when one of these things pop up so that you can incorporate that in your single view of the customer. Right. The other thing that we did up front, which is not necessarily in line with Agile, is we already had a pretty good idea in the beginning of what our Customer 360 need to look like, and that helped guide our data pipeline roadmap to make sure we bring in the right data at the right time. So we had a record design layout, and we sort of had an idea what the 360 need to look like so that you don't have to go back and redo work. And then I also want to say, be prepared to learn from mistakes and successes. I think it's proven that the human brain learns a lot more from mistakes than successes. So I also want to highlight a few of the challenges, and maybe this resonates with some people in the audience. We did our homework and we thought, okay, well, we're prepared. Brace yourself. You're going to still hit challenges that you did not anticipate. But don't worry, you will get over it. So even though we did our homework, we knew that we have third parties, systems that onboard customers. We knew they didn't talk to each other. We expected each system to have a unique identifier local to that system to uniquely identify customers that is onboarded in that system, but you cannot trust that. It's not guaranteed. Systems have a long lifetime, and even within single systems, you can have duplicates, and that was somewhat of a surprise to us. The second challenge that we faced was the non-existence of metadata. I'm a huge advocate for metadata, and you would expect a lot of these systems to come with metadata so you understand what the data is. That's not a guarantee either. So my team had to dig really deep into the data itself for it to make sense. We learned quickly that you can't trust a schema. So if a field, for example, says it stores a phone number, go verify it. Trust but verify. We actually have a system with a column called phone number, and it doesn't store just a phone number. It might have like device ID and all sorts of things in there. So that fact was a little bit of a surprise for us. Another item that's very important in our approach and what I would advocate for is engage your business very early on in the process. So dealing with discrepancies in data, and when you get to building survivorship rules for your model, the business input there is critical. It might be painful for them because it's a lot of work and they're not privy necessarily with the challenges data teams are with. So it's best to engage somebody that has a vested interest in the outcome. We picked somebody with the roots in marketing. It worked out great for us. So I would recommend that. The other thing that was a little bit of a challenge for us was that traditional business intelligence teams probably never use machine learning in their data curation process. So I observed them trying to, resisting trusting the machine. So they would, for example, try and overtrain models and pretend it's a rules engine. When they get over that hurdle, things get a lot easier. We did not have a data scientist in our team, so we invested in the DME component of Zaloni. It stands for Data Mastering Extension. It just made it a lot easier. So you could get away with not having a data scientist for that purpose. You may have them for other things, but to build those models that you're going to use for building your golden customer record, you may not need one. So as I said, even if you think you're prepared for everything, brace yourself. You're bound to run into unexpected challenges. So Susan, I hope that answers the question somewhat.
That answers a bunch of questions about life or parenting or any number of topics. It never goes the way you think it's going to go. Actually, those were great insights, and it made me realize, and this is a consistent problem we talk about with a number of different industries, but it's very prevalent in banking. So many of the sources of origination of your data are not yours. They're third-party providers, and you have to trust, kinda, but verify. That's a great lesson. All right, let's drill into this DataOps approach. You've mentioned that a couple of times. In fact, I just wrote an article on DataOps, what that means. And I think for some of our audience, that might be a new term, and it's not exactly the panacea. It's not all things to all people, the approach itself. But talk about your approach, how you kind of define DataOps a little bit differently and put a very customer-centric spin on it.
Yep. So in essence, Susan, we are following, the classic steps of DataOps, meaning that you start with a business objective and in the end you operationalize a model. We just added an additional spin to it, making it more around and applicable to banking. So if you guys know, in banking, you think that there's a lot of money that flows, right? It's actually the data that flows and not money. So the same governance that you put around money flowing around, you have that governance around the flow of data. It almost reminds me of like how an air traffic controller works. So the air traffic controller needs to know about all the planes that come in and take off, but not just on that airport. They almost need to know about other airports too, because airplanes come from other airports and go to other airports. So that's a controller mindset of how the data flows. But what the air traffic controller doesn't have to do, they don't need to know about all the passengers that sit on this plane, but we do. So that's why we add passengers or the customer into the mix as well, because we need to know which customers comes in as part of which stream. Because like I said, these streams are going to come from a third-party system, and each one of them have their own nuances. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. So that allows us, as we know that these customers came in through the system, that we can design a solution for that specific nuance. Because that we found is that they're not alike. Each one of them have different challenges. And it gives us the agility to take one data source at a time. So there's a few other things, a few tips that I wanted to give you guys on how we approach and how we stayed agile. So the first thing, like I said, is address one data source at a time. Believe me, at some point in time, all these names are going to start to blend into each other, and the team, if they do not focus on one data source at a time, they might confuse themselves, and you will just lose time. So focus on one data source at a time. And as you ingest, more and more, they do get better. The first one takes a little bit, and there's wins after ingesting each individual data source at a time. Because in your process, you're going to tackle the data quality issues. So that's the next thing that I want to say. Don't expect this magical mastering process to solve your data quality issues. You actually need to catch those data quality issues before they enter the mastering step. So each new source that you bring in, you help your business clean up and improve the data quality by rejecting the bad records, send them through the process, come back in. And that's also why it takes a little bit longer. So as you work through each individual set, you run the ingestion multiple times, you're going to get fewer and fewer rejected records that makes it through to the mastering process. And then I also want to bring back an earlier point that don't pick a technology platform that is too hard to learn. That if you have a steep learning curve, it takes away from the work that they actually need to do, is defining the business logic and need to learn the data. And another reason why I like to call it customer-centric, these data flows that ingest and curate and provision this golden customer record is currently the only thing in our system that uses the machine learning algorithm. And you guys know that can be pretty resource intensive. So what we want to do is we want to make all the cluster resources available to take care of the customer first before we go on with ingesting the rest of the data pipeline. I know a long-winded answer for an easy question, right, Susan?
No, actually, those were two really, really big learnings that I want to highlight. That address one data source at a time. I see customers get wrapped up and almost paralyzed when they try this shotgun approach of trying to address 100 different data sources. And it's almost like you need to be kind of linear. Take one source all the way from beginning to end, then tackle the next one, because they all have their own unique challenges, and you need to be able to focus to be able to get success. So that's a great piece of advice. And then not letting the technological complexity distract you from the real mission, which is cleaning up data and getting it in people's hands. So two great pieces of advice. Okay. All right. Next topic, which is, I think, banks, like every other industry right now, are completely reeling in response to COVID-19. A lot of our customers are also in the pharmaceutical industry. We're all learning a whole new way to do business and to conduct our daily work lives as well as personal lives. But so how has your approach and your DataOps mentality, organization, how has it helped you be agile and responsive in light of COVID-19?
You know what? There's actually a few things, Susan, that I can say about that topic. So DataOps by nature helps you to be agile and expect to be derailed at any moment and be able to handle that, right? So just the agility around adopting DataOps model almost mentally prepare you to say, well, we're not in control of anything, even if you think you are in control. Things might pop in, and you need to handle that, and fast, because there's a lot of people that were dependent on banks to disperse funding made available by the government, right? Another aspect, too, is like when I talk about do your homework about data, the better you know your data, the faster you can respond. So I cannot imagine in the past, if we didn't go through this whole golden customer initiative and forcing ourselves to really know the customers through their data. Because we in the data team, we don't have the luxury of going and talk to customers. So all we have is we can get to know them through their data. And we know them through transaction systems that capture their data, not customer systems that capture their data. So we had to sift through a lot of transactional data and then weed out the data about the customer and get to know them that way. And that helped us really respond a lot faster. So it's a combination of going through the effort and learning about the data itself and learning really who our customers are and where there's gaps in the data that we wish we captured that we didn't, and the ones that we did, to know the flaws in them, so what you can trust and you cannot trust, really positioned us, I think, way better to deal with these issues as they come up. And that there may be other things that come up, whether it's COVID-19 or something else. That's going to happen. Another thing, too, is when we talked about earlier about digital transformation, boy, is this a time when we really see the value of being able to do things digitally, right? If you have to stay home and you cannot do all your transactions and buy everything digitally, imagine where we would have been during this pandemic if we did not have the digital capability. So I think this just reinforces the need to really ramp up our digital capability and how we can respond to that.
It was interesting to watch in the news, just as we went through the Paycheck Protection Program and $349 billion that got consumed in less than 2 weeks. It was fascinating to watch. The banks that jumped on it were out in front and served their customers, and then a number their customers were kind of left out hanging to dry because they couldn't respond fast enough. Leilani, I want to drill into something that you mentioned earlier, and it was engaging your business users early, and you had mentioned marketing. What's the cadence? How do you engage them? Is it a steering committee or is it a regular meeting? Kind of talk about how you partner with your business users a little bit.
Well, we had then just become part of the team. So he was with us and knew what our objectives was. I think that way he was literally part of our Agile team. He was part of our stand-up, part of Scrum, part of everything. But the piece that the business really need to help us with, you can imagine if you bring in data from multiple sources, you have to pick survivorship rules when you build your model that says which system do I trust more than other. We in IT don't necessarily have that insight. So having been with us every day, walking through and also coming up, it took a long time, really, to come up with the survivorship rules. And that's another challenge why they need to stay in there. Every new system that you introduce that adds to the mix of the source of customers that come in, you may have to rethink your survivorship rules. Because that system may have an attribute that you can trust over other systems, right? And I know marketing in the past really struggled with not having clean, accurate data, right? Emails that bounce back, or not getting a hold of a customer, or market to the same customer twice. That's kind of embarrassing, right? So they had a really vested interest in having this clean, clear customer view with us. So we had, our idea why it was. And I knew marketing had the same. Besides our digital team, of course, they're number one, right? But our marketing team is probably short on their heels. So engaging the business, making them part of our Scrum team, they're there, Ben is part of every stand-up, and he sometimes now even would recommend things that is way more technical than what I think at the start. He would have thought, oh, I'm not technical. Okay, now Ben starts to be technical.
So by getting them engaged and vesting them, you're actually teaching them. You're increasing their data literacy with each interaction, it sounds like. That's great. Hey, Leilani, let me divert for just a moment because we put this next slide in terms of unified data ops because you're using vocabulary about the DataOps approach, methodology, organization, and I think you and Zaloni are in lockstep in that we define this a little bit more broadly. So I wanted to share this picture with our audience today in terms of what does this really look like from the various sources, platforms, environments. Where do you start and what does it entail? So when we think about this unified data ops platform, it starts from the very beginning of the life cycle. When you collect data, inventory it, and yes, I share Leilani's view that metadata is essential, but not just hey, this is the field, this is the character length, yada, 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 but truly active, interactive, augmented metadata. Who's touched it? How many times has it been touched? Is it clean? Where did it come from? Who sanctions it? What does the data steward say about it? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, real good metadata that somebody who's actually shopping and researching, is this data good to use? Is it fit for purpose? All the things they need to know about that data. And then classify it, profile it, and then controlling it is not just access controls. Leilani mentioned automating, putting some machine learning into the data quality process, making recommendations, whether it's GDPR or CCPA, whichever regulation, HIPAA, et cetera, making some recommendations on how to mask tokenize, encrypt specific pieces and types of data. And then the secret sauce is tracking that lineage all the way back to, and then all the way forward to its ultimate endpoint. If it's in a BI dashboard, if it's in an AI algorithm, however it gets consumed. And then finally, at that consumption layer, helping our customers build these marketplaces where your end users, your data scientists can actually go shop and provision and collaborate around data so that it becomes much more self-service, much more autonomous in how people get at it, provision it in a sandbox, set up their own Snowflake environment on AWS so they can start to run some A/B tests across various algorithms to determine what's going to be most effective to reach out to those customers. So that, to us, is what the unified data ops platform, that's what Arena is, helping you have transparency and visibility at every step of that life cycle. All right. So having defined it that way, Leilani, let me start off the questions. And audience, please post any questions you have to the chat in Bright Talk. Leilani, let me kick it off. You started this from scratch. How did you pick? How did you decide and choose your partner and your platform in this journey?
Earlier on, I started to look at what features I want. So I created a grid and say, well, I want like a way to capture metadata. I need to be able to classify data. Data quality for me was non-negotiable. So how on earth am I going to ensure that the data is trustworthy? Because for me, data governance is about instilling trust in the data, and data quality is one part of that. So I did not want to compromise on data quality. And in our world with GLBA and CCPA and all these regulatory requirements, we could not keep up with classifying data based on what the regulators were classifying as NPI. So I went down the path and said, we need to classify everything. So then if there's additional fields that come in, for example, CCPA introduced device ID. So being able to classify and tag the data and then have rules on how do I treat it based on how it's classified was important because I can't keep up doing it after the fact, right? And another problem that we have in our world, and I don't know, maybe it exists somewhere else too, is that if you have a data platform that doesn't allow you to leave the data where it is and use it where it is, but forces you to pull it out and analyze somewhere else, that introduced that data sprawl and introduce your risk exponentially because then you lose track of where it is. So I wanted a data platform that it makes it easy to ingest data too, but keep the data there while you're using them. So avoid having the need for people to pull it out so that they can analyze it somewhere else. So it's this comprehensive list of things. And my team look at me and it's like, dream on, lady, how are you going to get this? But we evaluated, we did a tabletop first and have all the players, believe me, there's a lot to choose from, right? And just check off which features that they have. And that's how we ended up with a unified platform. Susan, is because it's the one that has by far the most features that we need. I did not come from a school where I want best of breed at a feature level. For me, how it all works together is way more valuable. I do not want to waste resources on integration after the fact or make things talk to each other after the fact if there is no business value for that. Maybe sometimes there's other people that think there's value in having best of breeds, but having components is probably fine for some, but for me, if it's integrated, unified, and it gets the data in one spot, so meaning I can ingest it easy and I can easily use it from the same platform, was key to our decision.
I heard that from another one of our banks is that, you know, if our platform can get us to 80% of data quality, data ingestion, augmented data management, catalog, role-based access control, like the entire litany of that list of your spreadsheet of every requirement, then great. Let's keep it in one platform. Maybe every once in a while there will be an outlier where there is a very, very, very specified thing, feature or function that we need. Then and only then will we make an exception and go outside and get some sort of specialized tool. But exactly to your point, let's not break that transparency, that lineage, and with a separate piece of technology unless we absolutely have to. So a lot of people are thinking along the same lines. All right. Hey, Leighton, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, and thank you both. We can move on to the further audience Q&A. The first question is, can you talk more about protecting customer data when building golden records?
Okay, so let me answer it this way. When you build the golden customer record way up front, you sometimes need the actual values. So the team or who you expose the raw data that feeds into the algorithm and build the clusters to detect duplicates. You want to keep that as small as possible. But the moment you're done with mastering, now some of those toxic NPI items about a customer is no longer relevant. So the Zaloni platform lets you at that point now tokenize them. So that further protects, we kind of fondly call it, we create a digital twin, because very few items there is actually the toxic element is what it is anymore. It's a representation of it. So the exposing the actual raw data in the beginning to a small set of people that their purpose in life is to build this golden customer record, and then tokenize them after you're done. When you expose it, it's a really good model, and it's how the zoned architecture, it means Zaloni works, is that after you're done with it, when you expose it, it transparently can tokenize or encrypt or mask. It has different capabilities. Sometimes tokenization is fine. Sometimes you need to tokenize. Tokenization doesn't really work, but you need to mask it so that don't see the full number. All of those are built into our workflow. So the workflow that push and provision outweigh at the end incorporates the tokenization.
Thank you. The next question that we have, can you discuss connecting disparate customer data sets without unique identifiers?
Well, we actually don't care if it has a unique identifier, because the attributes that we use to build a golden customer record gives us a unique customer entity at the end. We assign then a Bremer-wide unique identifier to it. So you know there's going to be duplicates. And in the machine learning model, one part of it is a clustering algorithm. We detect that these three people are the same, and then we give it our own version of the unique identifier. So whether the system that it comes from has a unique identifier or not, we keep that as reference so we can go back to that system, but it's not crucial for our process to work to have a unique identifier coming in from the system. But as a matter of fact, we know we're going to get duplicates that come in.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. How often do you have to make adjustments and retrain your machine learning model?
I think I touched it a little bit earlier. The biggest thing is actually if you have to adjust your survivorship rules. Retraining the model is pretty easy. You build a new training data set, and the DME component makes that easy. But what is sometimes a little bit cumbersome is rethinking survivorship rules. And not necessarily each new system that you bring in will impact survivorship rules, but that is something to look out for over time, is that you need to readjust your survivorship rules when you bring in a new source that can potentially disrupt what you originally thought was who trumps who, and who can I trust over who can influence that. So it's not necessarily on the model side, then on the survivorship side that you need to watch out for. We do validate our models for accuracy quite frequently because, like most banks, we have a model risk team, and that is what they need to do to validate that it's still accurate. We haven't really had to retrain the model yet, but we had to adjust the survivorship rules.
Thank you, Leilani, and thank you, Susan. That concludes our live discussion today.
Hey, Leighton.
Yes,
Leighton,
of course.
There was one other question that came through on chat. I just wanted to, because I think it's really critical. So in just a minute or so, Leilani, you mentioned early on that you guys defined the customer 360 profile in advance. How did you decide what attributes to include, which sources to use? Just talk about that process of truly defining what was in that golden record at the beginning.
So the golden record, so thanks for the question. So the golden record is essentially to identify the customer, to have enough attributes to confidently say this customer is who they are, right? But now I need to, the first layer of 360 is what other business do they have? Do they have insurance with us? Do they have mortgage? Do they have a deposit account? So that means I need to also bring in the account number so that I can link those, right? We actually have a step further than 360, we call it 720, so that we can also link in behavioral aspects. So our 720 vision is to add behavioral. We're not there yet, but just from a core 360, if you focus just on the golden customer record and how do I identify a customer, the other aspect of customer 360 is graph analytics, right? You need to be able to link customers to customers, right? Customers to account and customers to customers. So we call it like householding in the finance industry, and then you have super householding. Is having those attributes available to do your householding or your link analysis after the fact. If you didn't determine that in the beginning, you probably may not bring in that data.
Wow. Very, very complex. Thank you, Leilani, and thank you so much. This was I learned a ton. So, Leighton, I turn it back to you.
Yes, of course. Thank you for answering that final question. That concludes our live session today. If the audience would take a moment to review the additional resources available under the Attachments tab, and be sure to visit the Zaloni overview. You can request a custom demo of our DataOps platform Arena if you go to that link. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to hearing from you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.